The next thing I want to go through is something that I know a lot of you are very, very interested in. So, wanted to talk a little bit about it because we have a little bit of practice footage. For those of you that may not follow him currently on Twitter, Nate Goetz, My Takes 101, is kind of a stalwart, troll in the Alabama community. And he, released some practice footage of Jalil Bethea and Amari Allen. So want to play that here for everybody that may not have seen it. And then additionally want to talk a little bit about what I'm seeing in this practice footage and what I think, is of interest to me with this. So we'll play Amari Allen first, and then we'll go through Jalil Bethea. With Amari Allen, the things that jump out to me, he has really, really good athleticism. You're seeing a guy that looks comfortable with the basketball in his hand. He looks like somebody that has obviously played point at times. He looks like somebody that, is going to be able to be a guard that handles the basketball. Not that he's going to be a lead guard, but I do think that he's going to be able to be a wing and a guy that can handle the basketball and is more than comfortable at, starting the break in transition, especially if he gets the rebound. He's also going to be a guy that, definitely is not afraid to shoot the three, right? The two things that kind of stand out about him is the athleticism and the ability to shoot. He has a pretty quick trigger, and then his ability to kind of elevate when he gets the ball. He has a couple of dunks in these clips, and I think that really just shows, again, his ability to elevate very quickly. And that's something that we're going to talk about with both him and Bethea that I think is something that you have to circle when you think of some of the new guys versus what we've seen in some guards of Nate Oates' teams past. Not to say that a guy like Rylan Griffin or a guy like Aaron Estrada or Mark Sears, in Mark Sears' case, a little different, but in some of those other guys' case, not to say that they couldn't dunk the basketball, but it was a situation that they just didn't, right? Even like a Rylan Griffin that was very, very athletic, he wasn't somebody that really went up with authority to try to dunk the basketball. Oftentimes, you would see him go up a little weaker. And again, when you're looking at the SEC and you're looking how the defenses play in the SEC, that's something that can be a little bit of a concern, right? And the reason it can be a concern is if you go up weak in conference, there's so many fouls that get called, but then there's additionally fouls that just don't, right? In some cases, right, you play a Tennessee, it feels like a football match out there because of how much contact is being allowed. And because of that contact being allowed, think about like a Houston game last season when we played in the Players Era tournament. You have so much physicality that's happening in that game that it really just feels like a different game of basketball. And if you have a guy that's going up really weak with the basketball, oftentimes those are the ones that end up having problems, around the rim because their layups just aren't falling, right? That ends up being what you have happen. Versus when you have a guy that uses his athleticism to his advantage and goes up strong and just finishes with the dunk, that, obviously, it's a little flashier. It gets the crowd into it, but additionally, it's something that's just way less likely to get bumped off guard. And if you go up with that much authority, if you're getting bumped, you're getting the foul call more often than not, right? When you're getting the layup, that's often not going to get the foul call, and that's something that is a little bit of a concern when you're talking about the way that college basketball is refereed, at least in the SEC today. Then we will move over to Jalil Bethea's practice footage. His practice footage is, again, very similar. You notice a guy that looks very, very comfortable with the basketball. He's not afraid to have the basketball in his hands. He's also not afraid to go up and finish with authority, right? That's the first thing that you see. Even though he's a guy that's listed at 6'3", 6'4", he is somebody that absolutely has that ability to finish, with authority through contact. He has really, really good hops and is a very, very athletic guard. He also has a really, really good shot. That's another thing that just kind of jumps out at me when you're looking at him. He has a really good three-point shot, and he's somebody that when we thought about him coming into the season, you thought about a guy that is going to be very similar to Aiden Holloway, where you're hoping that the five-star potential comes to shine and that shot just comes back with an ability to play in an offense like Nate Oates', right? What I'm seeing, obviously practice footage is not real game footage. I know that and I'm well aware. But what I'm seeing in this practice footage, I'm seeing somebody that looks more comfortable, right? When you look back at some of his footage at Miami, even some of the shots that he was making, it felt more forced. It didn't feel like it was in the flow of the offense. It didn't feel like he was like stepping into things. And again, this feels similar to what we talked about with Aiden Holloway last season. This feels similar to what we were talking about all last season, where it just feels like you can get a little bit more in the flow. And when you're shooting in the flow and when you have other guys that can space the floor around you, that just allows you to do much more things. The other thing that I really like about the footage is one of the last clips of the footage shows a defensive steal. And the reason I'm talking about that is what it showed to me is those instincts similar to what we saw saw out of like LeBaron Philon last season. The best way to think about it is like that Alabama-Auburn game last season in Auburn Arena. LeBaron Philon gets the steal, finishes with the dunk, and that ends up being one of the difference makers in that game, because if he doesn't have that steal, Mark Sears doesn't even have the ability to hit the floater to win the game, right? That's what you're seeing when you're talking about that. I'm not going to say any of the guys on our team are just going to be this insane defensive stopper that all they do is defense, 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 right? Now, do I think this team is going to be able to defend? Yes, right? I do think that this team is going to be able to defend, but I think what you're going to see is similar to a Jalil Bethea or LeBaron Philon or what we've seen out of different guys, is I think you're going to see some athletes that are able to make a break on the ball, able to be twitchy, able to, jump some passing lanes and be able to get easy runouts on the other end. And I think you potentially are going to see a team that actually does potentially well from a steals perspective, a little more than you've seen in years past. Because one of the things about how Alabama has done in some years past is we haven't always been as good at generating those steals. And I think that this season, because of the type of athletes that we're going to have out on the perimeter, I think that is something that you potentially will see. Again, I've seen it in clips with this. I've heard other things about a guy like Keaton Bristow. Obviously, I know the length of a guy like Taylor Bowen. All of these attribute to the fact that I really do think that Alabama is going to be able to potentially generate some more steals and some easy runouts on that end because of the defense they're able to bring to the table.